This is Brass Check, and it's Wednesday, August 20th, 2024. And many of you have heard me complain about the million-dollar podcasters, and I'm still going to complain about them, but I have a new tactic. I'm just going to declare us the billion-dollar podcaster. That's because we're 1,000 times better than all of them put together. And I'm going to prove it with this program. It's 2024. We're going into the presidential election. How much do you really know about what's going on? We're going to lay it all out for you like nobody else has. Trust me on that, as one of the candidates would say. The first person we're going to look at is Tim Walz. Something I'd love a Minnesotan to do is document the reality that besides the fact he was the worst COVID governor of all, he made Cuomo and the freak out in California look like North Dakota. But he's also a thief. One of the ways he stole money from the people of Minnesota is one of his best buddies owned an abandoned supermarket in a mall. It just failed. And was a useless, worthless piece of property. Guess who bought it for many, many millions of dollars to help with the COVID situation? And guess who never used it? But Tim Walz's buddy got a lot of money from it. There's 1,000,001 stories out there. We know there are people that call themselves reporters. Get on it. But anyway, here's some good reporting from I won't call our friends at Fox because they're jerks too, but they did some good digging on Mr. Walz.
Welcome back. Indiana Congressman Jim Banks writing a letter to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin demanding answers on whether Democrat vice presidential nominee Minnesota Governor Tim Walz complied with foreign travel reporting requirements for the security clearance that he likely had while serving with the Nebraska and Minnesota National Guard. This is during his 30 trips to China. Banks writes this: any individual traveling dozens of times to an adversarial nation in a personal capacity while having access to classified information poses an obvious security risk. An individual with a clearance should have had the good judgment not to engage in such travel in the first place. Walz lived and taught in China for a year. He honeymooned there and ran a business taking students to China. What do you know about the Democrat nominee for vice president in terms of his engagement with communist China?
Yeah, this is an extremely serious matter because taking high school students to China for these trips would have had to be approved by the Communist Party's United Front Work Department. That's the part of the party that is in charge of subverting foreign governments. So this is obviously a very sensitive matter. And then when you add on to it that he may not have notified his superiors and finished all of the reporting requirements, that means that this is deeply, deeply suspicious. And if he didn't report this to his superiors, then this is, I think, a firing offense. He needs to be off the ticket, and he probably should no longer serve as Minnesota's governor.
All we keep hearing is how great they've been treating Tim Walz. He said he hasn't, one of the comments that he made, Gordon, was that he was treated exceptionally well in communist China, and he doesn't think he could be treated as well anywhere else. What?
And that explains why, even though he's talked about human rights in China, and I applaud him for doing that, the point is it has not affected the way that he acted as a representative in Congress. He did not move to impose costs on China for all of those things he talked about. And because he's been very supportive of engagement, that was music to Beijing's ears. You put all of these things together and it paints a very disturbing picture. Someone who should not be a heartbeat away from the Oval Office.
Well, I agree with that. We certainly don't want somebody who's a Chinese agent to be in the White House. Look what happened to Canada.
Flip, he was asked which country he most admired and referred to China.
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say we need to go green as fast as we need to start investing in solar. I mean, there is a flexibility that I know Stephen Harper must dream about of having a dictatorship that he could do everything he wanted. That I find quite interesting.
Okay, and you may have noticed, Tim Walz aside, there's a trend to have pretty boys at the top of the executive ladder. We got the Trudeau in Canada and Newsom in California.
They They are pictures from an accomplished political career.
Gavin is no stranger to the national spotlight. He's known for same-sex marriages here in San Francisco.
Of a San Francisco mayor turned California governor.
I mean, half of the agenda for this governor is going to be taking on Donald Trump in the White House.
Turned proxy for President Biden.
He's practiced at deflecting the presidency question. No, it's not the moment.
Brown became mayor. Even then, as Newsom became parking commissioner, then city supervisor, it was Newsom's political future attracting attention. Now, the former parking commissioner turned governor is a global brand, traveling to war zones, to China, and crisscrossing the U.S. campaigning for the Democratic Party.
Making a pair of high-profile visits overseas to China and Israel, Governor Newsom still insists that he is not running for president.
I hope you caught two things there. Number one, Willie Brown. His name is going to come up again. Willie Brown is the root of all evil, believe it or not, and I don't know why there's not a single reporter in this country that has figured that out. The second thing is, did you notice who Gavin Newsom's best buddies are? China and Israel. Okay? That's who runs our country now, China and Israel, not us.
There's a certain inexplicable magic that happens way out here in this cauldron by the bay, along these cliffs at the edge of the continent. An alchemy unlike any other anywhere else on Earth.
San Francisco, right when I arrive, I really come alive. When can we go? Dancing in the park, hanging on a cable car. Open your golden gate, you'll let nobody wait outside your door.
She slept her way to the top. That's true.
She did. She's in her 20s, and Willie Brown took her up as his mistress. There was a medical firm that dealt with San Francisco. He got her a 15-hour-a-week part-time job there, which she never showed up to, according to the Times, but they paid her $72,000 a year for 15 hours a week. And understand, she's in her 20s, which is 30-some years ago. That's big money now. So he got her promoted up, so she did 20 hours a week. Times reported she never showed up, but she got $120,000 a year.
Willie Brown, the former mayor of San Francisco, was a very important figure in Kamala Harris's early life in politics. He was her much older lover. There was like a gap of 30 years. She started seeing him in her late 20s. When she was an up-and-coming prosecutor, he lavished her with gifts. He gave her a BMW. He invited her to the Oscars. They went to Paris together. And most importantly, he made introductions in that world of Democratic politics. He helped her in her campaign to be the district attorney of San Francisco. Later on, she would go on to be the attorney general of California.
Her household income skyrocketed in 2014 when she married Emhoff and they first filed their taxes jointly. They reported $1.2 million in adjusted gross income that year. The couple has stacked up wealth along the way. Harris listed assets worth between $2.5 million and $5.8 million on a 2018 Senate financial disclosure form. And Emhoff rakes in millions as an intellectual property lawyer in California. He made a whopping $1.5 million last year alone. More cash is starting to flow into Harris's pocket too. Harris reported about $320,000 in net income from her memoir, The Truths We Hold.
Does that name Emhoff sound familiar to you? If you were at the World Economic Forum, I wasn't, but I've seen the videos, you'll see Emhoff on stage crying about how hard it is to be a rich Zionist while Palestinian civilians are being slaughtered because it's so hard on his people.
But as American Jews, I think the feeling is one of aloneness and being hated and being unmoored and all these things that we had maybe fooled ourselves into thinking that this wasn't so bad, we're not really experiencing anti-Semitism, it's never going to be this horrible. It happened. And then, as you've been saying, we kind of saw who our friends were and who our friends weren't.
Okay, San Francisco. Why am I bringing San Francisco up? Well, that's where Kamala or whatever her name is, Harris, comes from, the East Indian posing as an African American. That's where Gavin Newsom comes from. That's where Nancy Pelosi comes from. That's where Dianne Feinstein came from. And they were all, are you ready for this? They were all brought into politics, trained and mentored by one guy, Willie Brown. Been watching the news lately? See what can I use the word shithole? San Francisco has degenerated into? Well, it started in the 1990s with Willie Brown as mayor. And guess who was there reporting it? Okay, longtime subscribers know, and you really have to be a longtime subscriber. You know that we started this in 1997, Brass Check in 1997. And yes, we were one of the first alternative news sources on the internet, and we showed a lot of people how to do it. That's 27 years ago. And we were based at that time in San Francisco. Now, I don't know if the screen is showing right now, but here's one of our original reports. I'm not sure when we did this one, but it was in the 1990s. Made in San Francisco, Jonestown and official San Francisco, the untold story. That's a photograph there, folks. And the photograph, it has a man at the lectern talking, and to the immediate, we'll say left, our left, you'll see young Willie Brown or younger Willie Brown. And then what you'll see on the other side of him, on his right side, you will see Jim Jones. Yes, that is Jim Jones of the Jonestown Temple. Okay, and this was the year 1976. We found this photo, and here is the quote that Willie Brown gave about Jim Jones. I had the great pleasure of knowing a leader with tremendous character and integrity. Reverend Jones is regarded among government officials, civic and religious leaders, and particularly the black community and working class people with utter respect for what he has done to upgrade the quality of life in our area and to bring greater health and well-being to thousands of poor, minority, and disadvantaged people. Okay, guys, let me be the first to tell you that was absolute bullshit. It was obvious that Jim Jones was running a criminal enterprise in San Francisco in the 1970s. He abused and mistreated people, in particularly low-income black people. Everybody knew it. But the Democratic establishment loved Jim Jones. Why? Because he got the vote out and he probably funneled money to them. So what they would do is they would take poor, for instance, elderly people that were a little confused. They would adopt them. They would steal their Social Security and other benefits and then feed them mush and pocket the profits. That's what Jim Jones was doing in San Francisco under the watchful eye of the district attorney and the mayor at the time and Willie Brown. And we have it all on our website. It's called BrassCheck.com, Jonestown. And we also reveal that Willie Brown was a master of election fraud back from his very early days. And that's also on this website. And in addition to the Jonestown site, we did an extremely detailed account of an election fraud that took place in San Francisco under Willie Brown, directed by Willie Brown, when he was mayor of San Francisco. It's possibly the most detailed account of an election fraud anywhere in print or online. It's been up since 1997. And everything that happened in 2000 with the election fraud with George Bush Jr., everything they did to get him in the White House, they invented in San Francisco. And then all the other chicanery that's been going on since. So he is a master of election fraud. And the website, the relevant website for you to check out is BrassCheck.com/stadium. Now, to show you how bad this got, and by the way, Brass Check was the lead and for a long time the only investigator into the fraud. We managed to bring in a group called Voting Integrity Project. They were from Virginia, and they sent investigators, former retired FBI guys, people of that training, to conduct a real investigation. And they had a interview scheduled with a woman named Dolores Evans, who was head of the Bayview Hunters Point voting precinct. It's very detailed. You have to go to the website to understand how significant that was. She was an honest person, and she wanted to tell how she saw the ballots being mishandled. She happened to die just a few days before she was interviewed in a suspicious fire that not only killed her, but killed 5 other children. Someone set fire to her sofa in the middle of the night, and they all died of smoke inhalation. So we do not have a picture of Dolores, but you can look up her name. They've almost scrubbed her from the internet. They've certainly scrubbed all her photos, but here's a picture of a memorial. And that's not the only thing that happened in 1997. The author of this book, I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to read it for you. Paradise Lost by Richard Trainer. The author of this book was beaten within an inch of his life by two random people. They just jumped him and attempted to beat him to death. They didn't take anything. They just attempted to beat him to death. They didn't succeed, but he sustained really serious brain damage, and he never fully recovered. I've been trying to find him. He's quite hard to find. The subtitle of this book is High-Speed Trains Get Waylaid, Shady Politicians Get Billions, and Taxpayers Get the Shaft. Willie Brown and Dianne Feinstein were involved in this scam. You got to read the book to know what it's about. Basically, the way the scam worked was this. There was this ever-proposed high-speed train in California that still doesn't exist decades later. But what would happen is every time the state of California was about to pay super inflated prices for land along the path of this proposed phantom train that we still don't have, by some miraculous occurrence, a group of investors would go in there and buy the land cheap. And then when it was announced that the state of California was going to buy it at super inflated prices, they'd flip it. And they literally made billions of dollars that way. Feinstein was involved with it. Brown was involved with it. And some shadowy Chinese investors were involved with it. And in that same summer, let me just quote something from the book. Let's go back a bit to the fateful, crowded month of March 1997. In March 10th, the March 10th edition of the Chronicle, next to the front page story, there was another story worth noting. Dianne Feinstein's protest over the FBI's probe of, are you ready, everybody? This is 1997 San Francisco, alleged Chinese contributions to the Democratic Party and to a number of party candidates, including Feinstein and President Bill Clinton. It was, of course, dubbed Chinagate. That was 1997. Dianne Feinstein was involved in it. Willie Brown was involved in it. Billions of dollars were generated, and the Chinese were involved back in 1997. And there was something else we were working on in this era. In fact, this exact year, 1997, we produced one of the first times ever anyone had built a website specifically to promote a new book. And we chose as our subject Wei Jingsheng. Wei was arrested in 1979, and he was kept continuously in prison until 1997. The book came out in 1997, and finally the Chinese communists released him. Just for the timeline, so you know how all this worked, Tiananmen Square was 1989. So Wei was put in prison in 79. Tiananmen Square happened in 89. That was a despicable event. The whole world was horrified. Nobody wanted to do business with China. And then China started buying U.S. politicians. But I want you to understand who Wei was. He was put in jail because he was for democracy in China. And he was outspoken. And that bought him a nearly 20-year prison sentence under horrific conditions. Here's just some of what he said in his book. You claim, he's talking to the government, that, quote, we have managed to feed 1 billion people, end of quote, when it is actually you who are living off the labor of the people and claim that, quote, we have met their subsistence needs, end of quote, when it is the people themselves, through their own wisdom, resourcefulness, and arduous labor, under extremely difficult circumstances, that have been compounded by exploitation and oppression carried out by party ruffians and bureaucrats. So the point he's making is governments always, well, he's talking about China because that's the government he knows. They always like to take credit for all the great things they do when it's actually the people who put food on the table. They're the ones that plow the fields and harvest the crops and, stock the shelves and drive the trucks, but the government always wants credit, while meanwhile they've got their feet on our necks. He also said something else in this book, which we thought was really important, and this was the poster that he put up. And what did the poster say? He just asked this question, what is true democracy? It is when people, acting on their own will, have the right to choose representatives to manage affairs on the people's behalf and in accordance with the will and interests of the people. This alone can be called democracy. Will our enemies let us implement democracy? Of course not. They will stop at nothing to hinder the progress of democracy. Deception and trickery are the most effective means they have. All dictatorial fascists tell their people, your situation is truly the best in the entire world. So in 1997, while Willie Brown and friends were engaged in all the things they were engaged in, we were working hard to promote this book. And I guarantee Wei was not invited to any San Francisco cocktail parties when he was released in 1997. In fact, I have to point out, and it's on the website, when the New York Times wrote about him, they made a snide remark about the quality of his haircut. The guy had been in prison 18 years, and all they could talk about was his haircut. On this website, which came out in 1997, folks, I made a list of all the people the Chinese government had hired as, quote, consultants. You ready? Henry Kissinger, of course, Alexander Haig, Cyrus Vance, George Shultz, Dick Cheney, Brent Scowcroft, Carla Hills, Howard Baker, Edward Muskie, Warren Christopher, and Gary Hart. And those are just some of the superstars. And of course, they were hard at work paying off the scumbag politicians in San Francisco. And then I want to give one last quote. This is Deng Xiaoping said, yeah, we put Wei Jingsheng behind bars, didn't we? Did that damage China's reputation? We haven't released him, but China's image has not been tarnished by that. Our reputation improves day by day. And that came from the Los Angeles Times, quoted in 1997, and it's something that Deng said in 1987. Deng never made it to San Francisco himself, but Jiang Zemin did, and he was considered one of the 4 core leaders of China at the time. And here's the article. In his final visit to the United States as Chinese president, Jiang Zemin stopped over in the Bay Area to cement long-standing ties with San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown. At a private luncheon by Brown at San Francisco International Airport, the 76-year-old Jiang spoke warmly about his relationship with San Francisco. 2 decades back as mayor of Shanghai, he cultivated the sister city relationship with then Mayor Dianne Feinstein. Jiang chose to make the farewell stop in the Bay Area because, quote, he is an old friend of Willie Brown. Quote from Wang Ling, who was the press attaché at San Francisco's Chinese consulate. You know, Mayor Brown has been on trade missions to China 3 times, and each time he's met with President Jiang, so they have a very good relationship. Okay, and there's more to this Chinese angle, and this is a very fascinating story. The name is Wendy Yu. Y-U is her last name. And she was another girlfriend of Willie Brown. Now, when you try to find Wendy Yu on the internet, very hard to find anything about her except her status as a billionaire and somebody in the fashion industry. But there used to be all kinds of articles written about Wendy Yu, especially back when she was hanging out with Willie Brown in San Francisco. These are virtually, well, I'm not going to say virtually, they are impossible to find. It has been entirely scrubbed from the internet. However, there is one place that they didn't look. We have this thing called ChatGPT, and even though it's the scam of the century, it does do one thing very well. They're going to fix it, believe me, and we won't have access to this in the future. But right now, it does go out and find all kinds of stuff. And it doesn't know what it's supposed to tell you and what it's not supposed to tell you yet. I mean, it's been trained very well to not talk about certain things or to talk about them in a politically correct way. but it didn't know not to say anything about Wendy Yu. It will be trained to do what Google's doing, which is make sure that we only see the vanilla version of Wendy Yu. So I asked our friends at ChatGPT, was Wendy, okay, let's read it. Let's read it. Tell us about Wendy Yu. Willie Brown, the former mayor of San Francisco, had a relationship with a Chinese-American woman named Wendy Yu. Wendy Yu was a prominent socialite and businesswoman in San Francisco during the time of their relationship. Notice, socialite means she had a lot of money to go to a lot of very expensive parties. Their relationship was widely covered in the media due to Brown's high-profile position and her involvement in the city's social scene. Good luck trying to find any of those articles. Good luck trying to find a picture of those two together. I'm telling you, they did a thorough scrub job. Now, I asked ChatGPT, and like a small child that doesn't have a filter, it actually answered my question. Now, it will be trained in the future not to answer this question correctly, but we got this one. Was Wendy Yu, this is my question, ever suspected of being a Chinese spy? Yes, says ChatGPT. And again, guys, try to find this on Google. Try to find this on Yandex. Try to find this anywhere. It ain't out there. But ChatGPT somehow got fed this information, and their trainers have not erased it yet. Yes, Wendy Yu was rumored and speculated to be a Chinese spy. During her relationship with Willie Brown, some concerns were raised due to her connections and frequent travels between the United States and China. However, these suspicions largely stem from speculation and the sensitive nature of U.S.-China relations at the time. Neither Yu nor Willie Brown was ever formally charged or implicated in any espionage activities. Now, it gets better. Where is Wendy Yu? Because she's about the age of Kamala. Here's the answer. There is limited. This is a billionaire, guys. This is somebody who is high up in the fashion industry in China and the U.S. This is somebody who was a very prominent socialite. But now, 2024, the work is done. And here's what ChatGPT says. There is limited public information available about Wendy Yu's current activities or whereabouts. As of the last known reports, she has kept a low profile and has not been prominently featured in the media in recent years. Given her past involvement in the social scene and the speculation surrounding her, it's possible she has chosen to maintain privacy. And then I love ChatGPT. If you're looking for recent updates, they may not be readily available due to her low public visibility. And also due to the fact that I'm telling you guys, you cannot find anything useful about Wendy Yu, her relationship with Willie Brown, and the strong suspicions that she was an espionage agent for the People's Republic of China. And there's more. Remember when I gave that list of politicians that Willie Brown brought into politics? I mean, literally took them off the street, gave them their first job, and grew them in politics. Well, Dianne Feinstein or Steen, or however you say it, I don't really care, was one of them. And let me show you how close these two were. Okay? Well, actually, let me take a step back. Do you know how Dianne Feinstein became mayor of San Francisco? After the Jonestown disaster, somebody murdered, I mean, literally, it was a connected thing. Literally, this is not speculation. It was connected. Immediately after the Jonestown thing went down, the mayor of San Francisco and another, like a assemblyman for the city, were murdered. That would be Moscone was the mayor, and Harvey Milk was the representative. Okay, and that's what put Dianne Feinstein in the mayorship. Let me read Brown's own words about what happened. If Harvey and George had not been killed, there would have been there would not have been the second chapter or third chapter for Dianne Feinstein. She was finished politically, I add. She lost the election for mayor to Moscone. Dianne would have gone in a different direction because there would not have been a platform to launch her career. Now, just a sidebar, Kamala Harris, do you remember when she ran for president for the Democratic ticket for the nomination? She didn't even have 1% of the vote and she had to drop out early. Okay. Another loser who somehow was involved with Willie Brown, who somehow became a big winner. All right. It goes on. Brown goes on. These are Willie Brown's own words I'm reading, folks. Okay. This is not speculation, not conspiracy theory. This has come out of his own mouth. This is how deeply invested he was in Dianne Feinstein, the person and her husband with whom he conducted a massive fraud against the taxpayers of California. Here's what he said about her. I was the only elected official to endorse Dianne Feinstein for the Board of Supervisors in 1969. Okay? I was one of the few people sitting in her living room orchestrating how we get the votes to get her into the role of the interim mayor, a replacement for the remainder of George Moscone's expired term. She was automatically by charter the acting mayor, but she had to be voted upon by her colleagues to be the interim mayor. So acting is, you got to just jump in and do it, but then they had to approve you to be the interim mayor until the end of Moscone's term. Let me repeat what he said. I was one of the few people sitting in her living room orchestrating how we get the votes. Let me say that again, orchestrating how we get the votes to put Dianne Feinstein in as mayor, a woman who the taxpayers and voters of San Francisco did not want to have anything to do with. Oh, and lo and behold, she and Willie got involved in these land deals and made who knows how many millions and millions of dollars now, who provided the money? Because you have to buy that land. The land didn't yet. Someone had to buy the land. Oh, that just came from the Chinese. We're talking about 1997. There were basically two people doing reports about what Willie Brown was up to. One of them was Rich Traynor, beaten half to death. The other was me. And the key witness in our election fraud investigation died of mysterious circumstances. And are you surprised I left San Francisco? And I haven't really been back since. Talking about San Francisco.
For the longest time, I always said that the easiest job on earth was to work for, and most rewarding, SF Travel.
Right.
You didn't have to sell San Francisco. It was easy.
It's changed
now, obviously, very challenging.
It's all for how many ads you can get on TV. I don't care what the ads say. They really do need to go back to the drawing boards and start all over and make sure production is a big expense.
Well, they all seem to think that Kamala Harris is the person they need sort of endorsing them. I've been watching TV and seen 3 in a row where she's
endorsed
endorsing.
25 candidates. I think all 25 have an ad out for her, and it looks like she's wearing the same outfit in every ad.
And she's clearly reading the ad copy.
And not with a whole lot of sincerity. It's almost like a joke.
Pat Brown's father, Edmund Joseph Brown, was known for running scams and gambling operations in San Francisco. With the help of businessman William Newsom II, Pat Brown became governor of California for 2 terms. During his governorship, he awarded the Squaw Valley concession contract to William Newsom III and his partner, John Pelosi. The deal was criticized for the state of California paying for everything and getting nothing. William Newsom III grew up with the governor's son, Jerry, who was training to be a Jesuit priest. John Pelosi's son, Paul, married Nancy D'Alessandro, daughter of Thomas D'Alessandro Jr., who was known for smuggling heroin into the U.S. with Lucky Luciano and the Baltimore Mafia. John Pelosi's son, Ron, married William Newsom's daughter, Barbara. Over ongoing disputes about the Squaw Valley concession, William Newsom Sr. threatened to hurt the governor politically, just as Governor Brown was running for a third term against Ronald Reagan. He lost. But 8 years later, the former governor's Jesuit son, Jerry, reclaimed the governorship in 1974. He appointed William Newsom III to a Placer County judgeship in 1975, and 3 years later to the State Court of Appeal. William Newsom was an attorney for oil magnate J. Paul Getty, named in the 1966 Guinness Book of World Records as the world's richest private citizen. And while serving on the appellate bench in the 1980s, he helped Getty's son, Gordon, secure a change in state trust law that allowed him to claim his share of a multi-heir trust. After Newsom retired from the bench, he became administrator of the Getty Trust and provided seed money for his son Gavin Newsom, Nancy Pelosi's nephew, to start the Plump Jack business that led to a career in San Francisco politics as mayor of San Francisco and lieutenant governor of the state of California. Gavin Newsom was informally adopted by the Gettys after his parents divorced, and recently succeeded family friend Jerry Brown to be the current governor of California. For 80 years, these four families have ruled over the state of California politically. And with the help of Kamala Harris, Maxine Waters, Adam Schiff, and Dianne Feinstein, California's uncontrollable state government spending has amounted to over $2 trillion in debt and the highest tax rates in the country. They have made California a sanctuary state. They have been steadily chiseling away at the Second Amendment. They have passed laws for mandatory vaccinations. The homelessness population is on the rise so much that a typhus outbreak has reached epidemic levels. Thousands of needles from illicit drugs litter the streets.
If it's uncharted and unheard of, if it provokes and upends, if it dances to the beat of a different bongo, if it knows where the future is headed and gets there first in ludicrous mode, if it's a force that can be felt in all four corners of the earth, if it changes everything in an instant, well then the chances are it was dreamt up and built up here in San Francisco. It all starts here.
Okay, and that last clip was from the San Francisco Tourist Bureau. Look, we've covered a lot of ground here. I want to leave you with a few points. Number one, Braschek has been on the job since 1997. We started in San Francisco. We shined a very bright light on Willie Brown and the political corruption culture there. We shined a bright light on the reality of election fraud. We shined a bright light on the reality of corruption by the Chinese government in U.S. politics, all back in 1997. Obviously all these things are in play. I just want to read again the people who Willie Brown recruited, trained, and advanced in politics. Kamala Harris, who has a good chance, unbelievably, of being the president of the United States. Gavin Newsom, who's actually the second choice for that. Nancy Pelosi, the crook of the century, and Dianne Feinstein, the crook of the millennium. Without Willie Brown, these forces would never have been unleashed on the United States of America. I also want to point out that Willie Brown is the ultimate race hustler. What is a race hustler? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. I think it's pretty self-descriptive. But it's somebody that injects race into everything. When he was running this crooked election for the stadium bond, that was the election fraud. They wanted to give free money to the DeBartolo crime family so that they could build a stadium for themselves. He said, this is for the black people. What is he talking about? Black people weren't asking for a new stadium, and if you don't vote for it, you're a racist. I'm not kidding, folks. That was the line. He perfected this in California, in general, in San Francisco specifically. So when you see all these race hustlers out there and all these other hustlers using bogus progressive clouds and smoke to sell their evil, that's a Willie Brown production. He was the master of it, and he taught his students well. And I want you to remind everybody, Jonestown started in San Francisco. The People's Temple started in San Francisco on Geary Street. It's not there anymore at the post office. If you go to Fillmore and Geary, you'll see a post office. That's where the temple was. Okay, it began with fraud. It began with abusing poor people, mostly black people, and all the Democratic politicians applauded. And that included Willie Brown, that included the mayor, that included the chief of police, that included the district attorney. They all loved Jim Jones because he delivered the votes. So pretty dark stuff. I guarantee you're not going to hear this anywhere else. And it's all documented. It's all history. None of it is speculative. We are a country that is literally being run by the political sewer that was San Francisco in the 1990s. It's all the people. That's when Kamala Harris was a girlfriend to, and that's a polite word to put it, to Willie Brown. So anyway, heavy stuff. I want to leave on something that will relax us and, don't forget what you've learned here, but don't let it darken your day. We need a good laugh. I've discovered this guy. Apparently he's famous. I didn't know he was around until recently. He is hilarious. His name is Tim Dillon. I hope I'm saying it right. And he explains Kamala Harris way better than me or anybody else.
Yes, play this. Play this. That's right. That's right. This is the campaign. These are the policies. This is what you're going to get. These are the policies. This is what you're voting. You're voting for this. They're not even trying. And by the way, this is brilliant. They're not even trying to put out. Yeah, it's there you go. Let's get rid of that. But they're the people that, by the way, they have their perfect candidate, half Indian, half black, attractive woman. Every billionaire on earth, this is, if you were going to build a robot in a lab that would be secretly controlled by billionaires, it is Kamala Harris. Kamala is the candidate. She would be built if she was, what's that line about Israel? If Israel didn't exist, we would have to invent her. If Kamala Harris did not exist, billionaires would have to invent her.
Brass Check TV, free to you, not free to us. We've got a server bill, we've got an email software bill, we've got a tech helper bill, and that happens every month. So to everybody that is supporting us financially, that's paying for their subscription in one way or another, we really appreciate it. If you're not, consider doing so. Everybody's got money for the newspaper and the cable bill and all that. Do you have money for media that's actually serving you? That's really the issue here. And when you help us, it allows us to get this information out to the world. So thanks to all our supporters, and if you're not a supporter already, please consider becoming one.